Hey, good to see you, bone crunchers. Uh, we're going to, in our usual way, we're going to begin with some prayers. Try to set a motivation. Sangye chodang soki chognam la jangshu badu dagni kyapsu chi dagi chushe dagi chunyen gipe sognam ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupa Sho. So most Tibetans know these words, but they're usually what is called shelke, sort of honorific language. So just the fact that it's a little bit different than ordinary colloquial way of saying things, that should bring your mind, just by saying those words, should help you to take yourself away from the ordinary conceptual thoughts you were having. I go for refuge until I am enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly through the collections of merit and wisdom that I create through listening to the Dharma. May I become a Buddha in order to benefit migrating beings. Sangye Chodang Soki Chognam La Changchu Badu Dagni Kyapsu Chi Dagi Chunyen Gipe Sognam Ki Drola Penchir Sangye Drupasho. Then a short mandala. By offering this ground, anointed with perfume and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the four continents, the sun and moon, visualized as a Buddha realm, may all migrators enjoy such a pure realm. O holy and perfect pure lamas, from the clouds of compassion that form in the skies of your Dharmakaya wisdom, please send down, release a rain of vast and profound Dharma, precisely in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued, of those to be trained. So the idea here is, you know, whatever is most appropriate, even if someone were listening from the outside and said the teaching was not touching the usual points, it in theory, we're requesting that the teachings would be descend down to us, maybe blessing the speaker in accordance with the needs of those to be trained, the disciples. Idam Guru Radna Mandalakam Niryatayami. Okay, so yeah, let's begin with a little meditation as usual. Relax your body, relax your mind. There's nowhere else to be, nothing else that needs to be thought about right now. It can be attended to later. Place your attention on your respiration. And then hold that with mindfulness, supplemented by the mental factor introspection. To the exclusion of all other thoughts. And if your mind is a little bit relaxed, somewhat overcoming the namtok, we'll talk about later in class, namtok, conceptualizing mind. Bring your attention to a more subtle object than the breath, mental consciousness. Not your eyes, not what you're seeing, not what you're hearing or feeling with your tactile sensation, not what you're smelling or tasting. Directly with the sense powers. But the various contents of your mental consciousness, whether they be past-oriented, future-oriented, present-oriented, memories, plans, observations about the present, or just random thoughts arising due to karma. All of these events rising and reabsorbing into the consciousness can lead us to infer that the consciousness has no obstructing quality. It doesn't hinder these events. It is clear light by nature, luminous. Like what we say, uncompounded space, that it's said to offer no obstruction to material things. The consciousness offers no obstruction to mental events. Which means that although we're habituated to thinking in very ordinary ways about the present situation and our response to it, that we can train our mind. We can cause those usual responses to appearances to reabsorb into the consciousness. There's no obstruction from the side of consciousness. It's just our habit energy that prevents us from doing that. And we can, by training, cultivate positive states of mind, sort of thinking amazing things. I can be a bodhisattva. I could work always for the sake of others, always thinking of them, like the Buddha did as he was practicing the bodhisattva deeds, like in the Jataka tales. Accepting the loss, giving the victory to others, seeing others with compassion, even if they harm us, and responding to their harm by benefiting them. We can make that our standard. We can reformat our drive, our solid state drive. I think Robert Thurman used to say, our hard drive. Now everyone is moving to solid state drives on their computers. The fact that we can recognize this and feel some joy, if not joy, at least some hope that we can become better because of this nature of the mind, the fact that we can recognize that and feel some joy is due to this auspicious moment of having of life, of leisure and endowment that is so rare. Most of the time, we're in states of greater suffering or sort of unrestrained bliss in the upper realms. Now we have a certain equilibrium. We're born at a time when the Buddhist teachings have been given and still exist. We have an interest in those teachings to some degree, and we have cooperative conditions of the benefactors, such as Shantideva Center, providing venue for the teachings. We have spiritual friends, like-minded spiritual friends, Sangha. We can use this opportunity, which is very rare. We may not find one again for a long time in the future. So using it now to achieve a higher goal of liberation or enlightenment, nirvana or bodhi, both of which were taught as goals by the Buddha. But the Buddha taught for those of his intelligent students not to be satisfied with his Hinayana teachings alone, the Hinayana teachings leading to our own nirvana, which is a legitimate goal, but puts us at a disadvantage in being able to eventually help beings in the future to instead strive to achieve enlightenment, even though it may take longer through the ordinary sutra path than achieving arhatship, achieving nirvana, that brings about a higher goal for ourself and a higher goal for sentient beings. The achievement for sentient beings of the form bodies of the Buddha, the Nirmanakaya and Sambhogakaya. The achievement of the Dharmakaya, which is the culmination of our own welfare, Rangdun. That goal can only be achieved by taking as our basis sentient beings and seeing them pleasantly, developing heartwarming affection for them, developing that into great compassion, seeing their suffering and wanting to eliminate it, and great love, wanting them to be endowed with the same happiness that we might achieve. As on that basis, developing the thought that it's not enough simply to help beings this lifetime, although that's one of the goals of the Bodhisattva, to work for the welfare of sentient beings, even now, here and now, as a doctor, as a teacher, as a performer, whatever. But as a further ultimate goal, to be working to achieve enlightenment for their sake, because it's only from that stance that we can effortlessly, spontaneously, and without error lead sentient beings over however long it takes out of suffering into higher realms, and eventually into enlightenment. To achieve that, we have to accumulate the two collections of merit and wisdom. A collection of merit being the cooperative cause of the form bodies for the welfare of others that we achieve by practicing the Bodhisattva's deeds, helping sentient beings, and by serving our spiritual guides. And the collection of wisdom that we accumulate by understanding and meditating on emptiness. As these were explained by the Buddha in his Perfection of Wisdom Sutras and others, as revived by Nagarjuna some 400 or 500 years after the passing of the Buddha, explained well, reinvigorating the Mahayana path, reopening it like the ancient roads in Rome that were, after some time, that were so well trodden, but when unused for a long period of time, were overgrown by the brush and upseeding of the stones that acted as the bed of the road, reopening that path, which was explained some several hundred years after Nagarjuna by Chandrakirti in his Madhyamaka and its commentary. And then several hundred years later, illuminated in his Gompa Rapsel by Lama Khapa. So think, I'm going to listen, contemplate, and meditate on the material today with the goal of accumulating the two collections in order to become a Buddha, because it's from that stance, that stage, that I can benefit them in the proper way. I'm going to participate in order to become a Buddha for the sake of sentient beings. Yeah. So, okay. Doris sends her namastes. Yeah. So how are we doing? Any questions about our meditations? We've been doing every week. Rachel, do you do the meditations?
I try, Venerable George. I get
Of
I get
course.
a little bit it's hard to listen and do the meditation sometimes for me. Like if I wanted to really try to do the paying attention to um the nature of the mind, I can't do that and listen at the same time.
Right. So the breathing exercise, I try to do less and less discourse. When we're looking at the clear light nature of the mind, um, I understand. But then within that clear light nature, we try to set a motivation. So then we need to use some words. And although my words may not be the words that you would be using, you can use them as a template when you try to set your own motivation to set something like that. There are various sort of paths of meditation like that to set up motivation that the lamas use. So if you are fond of some procedure, maybe that Lama Zopa or Yangtze Rinpoche or His Holiness the Dalai Lama has used, you can use that. But what we try to do is to, within that clear light nature, then having recognized that, to try to set a motivation. Okay. So before we begin, anyone have any particular question that they'd like to address?
I have one.
Yeah. Okay.
In the opening prayer, it said something like, "From the clouds of compassion that arise from your Dharmakaya wisdom." Is there a teaching on how that compassion arises from the Dharmakaya wisdom?
So the compassion is there all the time. So it's not like it's not there and then it comes. Right. So when we talk about in the Abrahamic religions, we talk about the Godhead as having certain qualities: omniscience, omnipotence, omnipresence, omnibenevolence, which is sort of like the compassion here, always benevolent and kind and so forth, and eternal. I think there might be one or two other in the Abrahamic religions, which quite parallel the qualities of the omniscient mind. So the omniscient mind, the Dharmakaya, using this analogy, making this request, is not as though the Buddhas would not be sending down inspiration unless we ask for it, but by requesting it, requesting the Buddhas to send down what is appropriate to our minds, that opens up the possibility in our mind, like the example I've given many times of us being at the bottom of having fallen into a crevice in the ice or, in some deep hole, and, not having any way to get out, requesting people, hey, help me. You'll be more aware if someone drops a rope down to you, if the Buddhas are sending down their inspiration, by making that kind of aspiration, please send down from the clouds of compassion that arise in your Dharmakaya wisdom, what is appropriate for me. So that means whatever you hear, if you make that kind of aspiration, you will think, this is the Buddha's teaching for me right now. Does that make sense?
But I thought is the Dharmakaya wisdom not a non-conceptual state?
Yeah, this is a non-conceptual state.
So how would clouds of compassion arise in a non-conceptual state?
They don't arise. They're always there, right? The nature of the Buddha's mind is continually imbued with bodhicitta. So in the case of the Buddha, bodhicitta doesn't mean aspiring to become enlightened for the sake of sentient beings, but it's the continuity of that. There's always question, does the Buddha have bodhicitta? So the Buddha has bodhicitta, which means that it is motivated by compassion for sentient beings, so that compassion is always present. So when we get to the stage of the resultant stage in the text, and we've talked about it before, the example of how the Buddha acts, how the Buddha activity and unfolds if the Buddha's mind is not conceptual, which is what you're asking, if the Buddha's mind is not conceptual, is a little bit like the example of a person who is throwing something on the what's it called? The wheel, potter's wheel, right? Potter's wheel. In order to start that wheel up, if you don't have a motor, in the old days there was some kind of thing, kind of like the little foot pedal on the old sewing machines, that you would cause the wheel to start to go, maybe with some effort, and then it would start going. And then when it got going strongly, by its inertia, it would continue to turn. So all of the effort in the Bodhisattva path with the conceptual mind brings about a non-conceptual, continuous mind, which no longer has to think about the welfare of sentient beings, what to do. It spontaneously acts for the welfare of sentient beings, kind of like that. Once that wheel has been started, so that once the omniscient state has been started, it's not going to slow down due to friction like a actual potter's wheel in the world. It will continue to go, but through that initial effort on the Bodhisattva path through conception, the non-conceptual state acts in that way. Okay. Anyone else have a qualm? Qualm? Okay. Yeah, Venerable.
I had always thought, and maybe I'm wrong, that this was maybe a reference to, like in the in Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, where the Gandalagema, where Lama Tsongkhapa descends on clouds of. I thought maybe there was a reference to that also, but maybe I'm just wrong. I mean, I don't mean like I didn't hear it anywhere. I'm just thinking that's. I thought that maybe there was a connection.
Yeah. You can, all of these various practices of visualizing the guru. So, say for instance, out of the compassion of the Buddha appears as the Sambhogakaya or Nirmanakaya. So we ourselves are not yet, most of us, I'm not sure. In my case, I'm not an Arya Bodhisattva. I'm not a Bodhisattva. So I don't have a chance to perceive the Sambhogakaya. So the Sambhogakaya is something that's perceivable by the Arya Bodhisattvas, right? With their wisdom and their in combination with compassion. We ordinary beings, if we're fortunate, we can see the Nirmanakaya when the Buddha arose at that time. So we usually imagine, say in the Gandalagima, when from Tushita, we imagine clouds of looks like fresh yogurt coming down, so white pristine clouds, and Lama Tsongkhapa and his two disciples, Kedrup and Gyaltsab arising in front of you in order for you to accumulate merit. So again, that Lama Tsongkhapa's omniscient mind is always here, but in order for us to accumulate merit, we can visualize that and invoke. When we imagine invoking the omniscient mind to enter into our visualization, that just makes that is an aid that Lama Yeshe used to say. That's just it's not as though the omniscient mind won't be imbuing our visualization and won't be accepting our offerings and our praise unless we invoke them. But by invoking them, inviting them, we accumulate merit and we make that whole visualization more powerful that way. Okay, good enough. Okay, so in our text, we are beginning on page 372 in Thupten Jinpa's Immaculate Translation. And on page 212 of the FPMT translation, we're going to be starting, although I'm going to review a little bit before this, we're going to be starting with this. Thus, Nagarjuna says that among those who assert persons and aggregates as possessing substantial reality, that paragraph, that's where we're going to be starting. So this is commentary to the two verses that are coming just before that from the Precious Garland. What's the Precious Garland? Ratnavali?
Ratnavali, yes.
Ratnavali, yeah.
Ratnavali.
Right. Almost sounds like novel, Ratnavali. So, Bruce, could you post the PDF that I maybe it's already there. Is it? Oh, she's going to post in a second. So there's a PDF that I prepared with this. There it is. Okay, that's better for me. I can read it on my screen this way. There we go. So this is from the Rinchen Tenghua. Rinchen means Ratna. Tenghua means Avali. Ratnavali. So this is for those of you who are a little more conversant with the Tibetan or even the Sanskrit in the case of John and Paul, maybe Suvash and I can't remember who else knows some Sanskrit. Certainly Venerable Shankar can make a stab at it from knowing some Indian language. So I've put here his note. So let's read first of all what Thupten Jinpa, how Thupten Jinpa had translated this. Those who assert person and aggregates. So these are verses, 61 and 62, I think. Is that right? From the Ratnavali?
Yeah, that's what is stated in the Venerable Joan's translation.
Yeah, right. So those who assert person and aggregates, the Samkhyas and the Ayulukyas and the Digambaras ask if they speak of transcendence of existence and non-existence. That's the first verse. Therefore, what the Buddhas have taught, that which is immortal and profound and transcends existence and non-existence, know this to be unique to his teaching. Okay, so in the text itself here, it says, Thupten Jinpa's translation, the Ayulukas. So in the Sanskrit, if you look at the first verse at the top, there's the Tibetan in capital letters, and below that there's the Sanskrit. And I've put in some dashes to spread. It's all one big line in Sanskrit. Yeah, I should put on my reading glasses to read. So it says Sa Samkhya. So Sa means along with the Samkhyas, the Ulukya, Nigranta, Bugdala, Sranda, Vadinam. So this is talking about the one of the things I wanted to point out was that Jinpa has just left here the Ayulukas. So just below that, he says, note 655 for this verse, literally children of the owl. So he has Ayuluka as Ukpuk, that's the Tibetan. So the Tibetans have translated this Alyuluka as Ukpuk. So usually Uluka is in Sanskrit means owl. And with the added A before it and the suffix YA at the end, it refers to the something that is a follower of the owl. So what's the sense of that? There's a history of the Vaisheshika, system in ancient India as having come from this one Indian sage who eventually was called Kannada, not Canada. Don't get excited, you Canadians. Yeah, so he was called that because what is it? Kana means what, John, in Sanskrit, you know? Where do we have that? Kana means grain, and ad, the end of it, where it says ad means to eat. So he was a sage that was practicing asceticism to please his spiritual guidance. I'm not sure if it was, I guess, Shiva, right? He came to be known as Kannada. The sage Kannada is the founder of the Vaisheshika system of philosophy, one of the six systems of philosophy that we've talked about a little bit. Since he lived upon grains picked up from the agricultural fields, so kana means grain and ad means to eat, he became known as Kannada. It is said that he performed severe austerities to get the grace of Shiva. So usually to please these various gods, you would do some kind of ascetic behavior, right? Carrying boulders to the top of the mountain or whatever. And it's so pleased with his devotion and faith, Shiva appeared before him in the form of an uluka, an owl, and taught him this philosophy. So that's why the followers of Kannada, or the Vaisheshikas, so he was receiving teachings from the owl, who was actually Shiva, manifesting that way. They're called followers of the owl, or as Jimpa has, as others have said, the offspring of the owl, or the followers of the owl, and so forth. Hence, Kannada's Vaisheshika Darshana, that means his teaching, is also known as Aluka Darshana, the philosophy revealed by Shiva in the form of a ulaka, or owl. I wanted to share that with you because that maybe give a little flavor to this. So at the bottom of the page, there's a translation by Jeffrey Hopkins. So he translates it a little bit differently. He says, ask the Samkhyas, the followers of Kannada. So he doesn't translate Ayuluka. He doesn't say that. He just gives the meaning, the followers of Kannada, which means those who have followed the teachings of the owl. Ask the Negrantas and the worldly proponent of persons and aggregates. So he's talking about four different things there: the Samkhyas, the Vaisheshikas, the followers of the owl, the followers of Kannada, the Nirgrantas, the certain kind of renunciates, and the worldly proponents of the person in aggregates, because that includes some Buddhists. Ask them whether they profound what passes beyond is and is not, or is not. That means after death, what passes on, like the Buddha, does it exist or does it not exist? And the second line says, thereby know that the ambrosia of the Buddha's teaching is called profound, an exclusive doctrine passing far beyond being and not being or far beyond is and is not. So the difference in his translation there is he's translating the Tibetan chime in the Tibetan as ambrosia, because in the Sanskrit it actually says, what does it say? Sa, in the very end of verse 62 in the Sanskrit at the top of the page. Can you pronounce that last word, John?
Yeah, it's sa sanamritam. No,
Amrita.
sorry, it's sha sanamritam. Sha sanamritam.
Amritam is the end. So in Sanskrit, it's fairly well known in Tibetan philosophy that the Sanskrit word amrita is so a is a negative particle at the beginning. Mrita means what, Paul, in Sanskrit?
It's usually death or to die.
Right. So amrita means deathless. So you could translate that as the Tibetans did, as chime, rather than dutsi. Usually, if we talk about ambrosia or amrita, sometimes it can be translated as dutsi, like in the, giving the tasting the blessed substance, as we call dutsi. It can be translated that way. It can also be translated as chime, meaning deathless, because amrita means deathless. So Jeffrey Hopkins, unlike Chimpa's translation, has translated it as ambrosia, as dutsi. Thereby know that the ambrosia of the Buddhist teachings is called profound, an exclusive doctrine passing far beyond is and is not. Okay, I just wanted to share that with you for those who might like to look at a little bit more detail. We can go over some of that on Monday in our next discussion class. So that was the quotation that was given, and now the Lama Tsongkhapa is going to give his commentary to that based on, this was quoted by Chandrakirti, so Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary is based on Chandrakirti's commentary. He says, thus Nagarjuna says that among those who assert person and aggregates as possessing substantial reality, such as the Samkhyas and the Vaisheshikas and the Nigrantas and so forth, if any appear to speak of something that transcends the extremes of existence and non-existence, ask them what it is. If they're talking about substantially existent things, is that substantially existent thing continued to the future, or is that substantially existent thing disintegrate at the time of death and so forth? They will have nothing to say about it. Therefore, Nagarjuna says, we should know that the teaching that transcends the extremes of existence and non-existence is unique to the sublime Dharma, the Sada Dharma, the holy Dharma, a distinctive feature that cannot be found in others' teachings. Okay, making sense? Okay, so his translation continues. So he's quoting now from the Basham. Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't mention that just directly. He just says, as this cycle of existence, as this samsara, has no beginning, why would inferior notions, inferior ways of thinking about existence not have emerged in the past? There must have been wrong ideas about existence in the past, right? Well, Mikhail, you have something you wanted to ask?
Yeah, sorry for the preceding bit here. If transcend existence and non-existence is about what is going beyond death, then I don't really understand why it is said that this is unique to the Dharma. I mean, many other religions propound life beyond death.
Yeah. Yeah, but it doesn't propound it in the way that the Buddhists explain it, that because phenomena are not inherently existent, you don't, that's like one of the 14 unanswered questions, right? Does the Buddha exist after he passes into parinirvana? After that, does he exist, or does he not exist? So that's one of the questions that the Buddha left unanswered in certain contexts, because the individuals needed too much other information first to be able to understand the situation. Because of the fact that phenomena are not inherently existent, one can say that the Buddha does exist afterwards conventionally. The continuum of the Buddha's mind exists conventionally after he takes the aspect of passing into parinirvana, and also that he does not exist inherently. Although he exists conventionally afterwards, he does not exist ultimately. So you could, does he exist? Does it exist or not exist? How did Jimpa say? Does he say exist, transcends? Yeah, existence and non-existence. He both exists and does not exist. So that's the ambrosia, that's the unique teaching, that's the profound teaching of the Sad Dharma, the holy Dharma.
At first reading, ask these other schools if they speak of transcendence. So I was more thinking like if ask these schools if they are able to posit something that is beyond intrinsic existence and non-existence,
Uh-huh.
in a more philosophical way, not about after death. But yeah, that was just a guess.
Right. So right above that, right above Jeffrey Hopkins' translation, so page 102 is referring to his translation of the Precious Garland. There is one book that's come out with that. So those are his translation there. Right above that is my translation when I translated these verses from the Madhyamaka Vatara many years ago. So here it says, ask the worldly ones, the Samkhyas, the owl followers, along with the Nigrantas, who propound the person and the aggregates. They propound that the person and the aggregates are inherently existent, that they're substantially existent. Ask them if they propound what passes beyond is existent or non-existent. Yeah, so that it requires, it's amenable to a lot of analysis, those verses of Nagarjuna, as is always the case. Hi, Jennifer. Yeah, what do you think?
Hi, Venerable George. Oops, sorry.
Oops, sorry. Hi.
Paul. Oh, hi. So, I just had a question about any relationship between the Hinayana view, the philosophical view of the emptiness of the aggregates. I mean, the non-emptiness of the aggregates, and the Buddha sort of not being in existence on a conventional level after he passes away. I don't know if my question is making sense.
Well,
but
a little bit
basically,
why the Buddha, what the Hinayana believes, let's say the Shravakayana, the Pratika Buddhavayana, in those scriptures, they believe that when the Buddha passes into parinirvana, there's no continuity of the continuum of the Buddha after that. That's the goal of nirvana, that they take the etymology of nirvana as meaning a snuffing out of the continuum, whereas the Mahayana would say that it's the snuffing out of the activating factors that cause you to ripen karma, right? When you become an arhat, when you reach nirvana. So there they're not talking about so much the emptiness of the Buddha or something like that as being the cause. They're talking about the fact that the Buddha no longer will exist once he enters into parinirvana. So upon entering into parinirvana, there's still the Buddha. And then when the Buddha has snuffed out his consciousness, there's no longer Buddha. So that's a reason that sort of well, let's say for using the example of the arhats, that's a reason for saying that the arhats are in this meditative equipoise, and they are not able to benefit sentient beings. It's almost as though they were snuffed out. Their consciousness was snuffed out, although their consciousness is still existing on some very subtle level there. So having said that, can you fine tune your question again? Is that answer your question, or is there still, did I not address what you were actually asking?
No, thank you. I'm sure it was a bad question. I guess my question is, is that belief somehow related to the Hinayana schools not believing in the selflessness of phenomenon as well as the selflessness of persons?
Well, yeah, there's some, excuse me, there's some relationship. The fact that they hold, say the lower schools hold that the Buddha does not exist after having achieved enlightenment, when he passes into parinirvana. So the Buddha under the Bodhi tree still existed after he achieved enlightenment, right? So he continued teaching. When he passed into parinirvana, they believe his mind stream would stop. So who would venture to explain how is that related to the emptiness of phenomena, whether they accept the existence of the emptiness of phenomena or not? Is that related directly? Anyone? Paul, what do you think? You're right there. You could talk out of the side. Jennifer's just to your left, your left, your right. Which is it? Your left, yeah.
Left, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is that if you think that phenomena inherently exist, then you would have to assert that they also inherently cease. Right?
Right. And so that once it has, and of course from the Prasangika logic, inherent existence cannot exist, and so that's to propose the inherent ceasing seems strange from the Prasangika point of view, but if that's what they were to say, that once the Buddha has ceased, he has ceased inherently, and from their point of view, they take the position that the nirvana means the ceasing of the continuum of the consciousness rather than the continuum of attachment that causes, or a thirst that causes the continuation of rebirth and so forth. Okay. So, Richard, how are you doing? Making sense? You look quite clean shaven. You look like me.
Yes, I get a haircut once every 2 months, whether or not I need it.
Right, yeah.
I have a question based on what y'all were just talking about.
Okay, if you make
it
it short.
If the Buddha passed into parinirvana, but he has the ability to emanate forms, why could he not return again as Siddhartha?
We could, but the sentient beings don't have the the karma, that was a particular karma of sentient beings at that time to appear in that form. So he may appear when he appeared as Siddhartha in this world, some 2,500 or whatever years ago, he also was appearing as Siddhartha in other world systems, in this trichiliocosm, in these billion world systems that are related with ours. He was also enacting the 12 deeds there in that form. But now this is a different time. Why would he necessarily appear as Siddhartha again? He would appear as some other way. Anyway, yeah, let's continue on. So the commentary writes, as this cycle of existence has no beginning, why would inferior notions not have emerged in the past? In the future, also, why would they not emerge? Yeah, of course, there'd be wrong ideas. Even in the present, some such as the white-clad renunciates, this is what we were talking about when the Nigrantas, I think, appear to present aggregates and so on to be substantially existent. So Jimpa has a note there. He says, although Tsongkhapa does not cite this as a direct quote from Chandrakirti's commentary, this paragraph appears verbatim in that text. So sometimes Lama Tsongkhapa has almost everything that Chandrakirti says in his Bhasham with some extra words in there. Like he'll say something, something, or in other words, this, clarifying some word and adding words, changing it, sometimes making it more simple. Whereas in this case, Jimpa notes that this one is quoted verbatim from the Bhasham. This paragraph appears verbatim in that text in his sub-commentary. So Jayananda, or Zayananda, as the Tibetans say, the only Sanskrit Indian commentary that we have to the Madhyamaka. Jayananda interprets this passage as an elaboration on what Chandrakirti meant by the word tirthaka, the forgers or the non-Buddhists, whereas a tirthaka would not necessarily be a non-Buddhist, someone who is even a Buddhist who has the wrong ideas could be called a tirthaka, as someone who propounds pernicious notions, tokpa nyempa. Tokpa means conceptions and nyempa means inferiors, or pernicious notions about substantial reality of things. Okay. How are we doing? Okay? I completely lost in the dust. So now we go into the next section, establishing that the word sam or matra, which means only, when we say chittamatra or whatever, establishing that the word only shows the primacy of mind. So in the Tibetan text, this just says sumpani. So this is the third of a series of outlines. So having shown how the rejection of an agent that is other than the mind itself is the purpose of the word only. So that's what we've done before. We've shown that there are no other agents. Remember, we talked about all of these different kinds of creators. I can't remember how many there were. There was something like 8 or something. And Suvash had mentioned at that time, what about Brahma? Isn't Brahma considered a creator? And I was a little bit unsure at the time. So in a little bit of research, one of the 8 or 9 creators that we talked about at that time was the creator of beings. What was it? Pashupati? Something like that? Pashupat?
Yeah, Pashupati.
Pushupati. So Pushupati was known by that name in a certain period of Vedic history, later took on the name of Brahma. So Brahma would be included in that list of the creators, Suvash. That was a question that you rose, that I think you had raised at that time. Where
So I
is
think it
it
was Prajapati, right?
Prajapati, Praja meaning those who were born, right? Prajapati, right? So Prajapati was, it's just like the Greek gods. When a different king came took over, sometimes the same gods had different names and different symbols symbolizing them, but they had the same general characteristics. So this Prajapati eventually became known as Brahma also. Okay. Paul, you look disturbed. Is it make sense? Okay. Okay. So now we get to a very interesting section here. So having shown how the rejection of an agent other than the mind is the purpose of the word only, that's what we've already done. It has been demonstrated that the word only does not negate external reality, the objects of knowledge. That's not what only does. As the Chittamatra would like to say, they would like to say that that the teachings in the Ten Bhumi Sutra and the Lankavatara Sutra, where the Buddha taught mind only, that meant that there was no outer world, that they were only the nature of the mind. So we've already shown that there's no agent, that the word only means there's no agent that creates phenomena other than the mind itself, and that it doesn't reject external reality, the objects of knowledge. Now the text presents a different explanation, an additional explanation, based on stating the primacy of mind, of how it is impossible that external reality is being rejected by the word only. Okay, so now it comes these two other famous verses, a little bit indecipherable for a long time. First verse, 87. Just as the word Buddha refers to, quote, one who has blossomed into suchness, unquote, so the sutras speak of mind only because the mind is primary in the world. The meaning of such sutras is not that matter has no existence. Okay, so this was a very problematic verse to translate before we had the Sanskrit of the sixth chapter. So when did that show up, Paul? 19
Oh, I think
2002 or something like that?
only in the last 20 years or so. Right.
Yeah, I think something like that. That the Sanskrit of these root verses, or some of them were known because they were quoted in other Sanskrit texts. There were maybe 20 or so verses or more. But many of them that we were interested in, what it was talking about, were not available. So once this verse was available in Sanskrit, it became more apparent what it meant. So, so here, so on Monday, I'll try to have another PDF. So the Sanskrit of this verse 87, what did we say here? Just as the word Buddha refers to one who has blossomed into suchness. So the Tibetan says Deni Gela. So you know what's the Tibetan word for Buddha? Mikhail, do you know the Tibetan word for Buddha?
Sangye. Sangye.
Sangye. So the Tibetans take the etymology from some of the scriptures that Ge means the Buddha's mind has been expanded to all of its qualities, or in this particular instance, expanded in its understanding of the thusness, of the ultimate reality. And Sang of Sangye can mean that it has, in some etymologies, means that it has purified all of the faults. So you have Sangye, he who is purified of all faults and is expanded in all qualities, sort of like a general meaning of the Buddha. So here it says, Deni Gela, so expanded into thusness, Sange Nejishin. So just as Sange refers to expansion into thusness, in the Sanskrit it actually has Buddho Yadvad, Buddha Tattvo Niruktas. I'll have the Sanskrit for those who come on Monday discussion group.
No,
So
Paul has put it into the chat.
Oh, you've got it in the chat there. Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Elvis Presley was. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. So, yeah, so the confusion about this, what was Chandrakirti actually saying here? Because it seems only to work in Tibetan when you break up Sangye. The word Buddha doesn't have two parts like this. It just essentially means awakened, right? So in the notes in Huntington's translation, his book called Emptiness of Emptiness. What was Huntington's first name? Anyone remember? Or is his first name? Do you have that text, Richard? Emptiness of Emptiness? Okay, anyway, in his text on pages 247, 248, in his notes to this verse, he says, the argument here is based on a bit of scholastic exegesis. Lavallée-Poisson, the French translator who had famously translated the Abhidharma-Kosha and Madhyamaka-Vatara and so forth and had the critical editions, he said in his Lavallée-Poisson's translation of the first line, it differs from ours. He has, and I'll have on Monday the French here. I won't even attempt to try to, unless someone has put it up there. Do you have that? What is that link that's just been put up there? Oh, the emptiness of emptiness.
Yeah,
right?
it's to the book.
Right, yeah. So
But
this,
it doesn't give his first name. It
yeah,
just
CW.
CW.
Yeah, I think I searched once to find out what his name was, and I couldn't figure out. Was it Charles Wilson or something like that? Anyway, CW.
Wisdom.
Right. So, so there's some French there. He says, in the footnote to this section, Vallée-Poisson suggests the following interpretation. And then again, he gives a quotation from the Lalita Vistara, the life story of the Buddha. Tsongkhapa explains the line quite differently. And he says, Sangye is explained as he or she whose wisdom concerning reality is gay, expansive. The first word, that is sang, is not actually present in the explanation, yet the title Sangye is still explained this way. So Lama Tsongkhapa's interpretation is that in this analogous fashion, when the sutras say mind only for the full expression, mind alone is preeminent in the dichotomy of form and mind, then the final word preeminent is not actually present in the presentation. So that's what we're going to be getting here. Just as the word, so Lama Tsongkhapa makes the explanation sound like it's relying on the two words sang and gay, whereas in the Sanskrit explanation, it's a little bit different. So that's verse 687. Verse 688 says, for if the Buddha knew the world to be mind only, was only mind and was not actually existent outside, and on that basis did engage in the rejection of matter, external matter, why then would the Great One, the Mahatma, right, another epithet of the Buddha, why would the Great One proclaim in the same sutra? So when you try to take some quotation out, when he's talking about Chittamatra and try to interpret that as meaning mind only, why in the same sutra at another place would the Great One proclaim that the mind was born from delusion and karma? What does that mean?
Why would delusion and karma necessarily imply that that means material reality?
So when we say, so in the explanation of that verse will be coming. So when we say that, it means that, say, for instance, famous quotations, so many quotations from Abhidharma Kosha and the sutras, that the world, the vessel world, and the inhabitants therein arise from karma, right? So, we have the vessel world, that which we all see is due to our collective karma. The individual appearances within that are due to our individual karma, our exclusive karma. So in this regard, let me read what a little bit of Huntington's note on this verse. He says, the argument here is, I already read that, right? In this, he quotes the Yasumitra's commentary to the Abhidharma Kosha. Am I pronouncing that right? Is it Yasumitra? Yashomitra. Yashomitra was a commentator of Abhidharma Kosha. So in his commentary, he says, on account of the blossoming of intelligence, on account of that, the word Buddha means blossomed or expansive. And in the Sanskrit of Yasumitra, he says Vibhuddha. So V, the prefix V before Buddha makes it sort of expansive, as with a lotus that has blossomed. So when we say, gay, or else sung, or else on account of casting off duality, which is the sleep of ignorance, Buddha means awakened, pra-Buddha, as with a man who is awakened. So the Sanskrit explanation seems to be, when we're talking about Buddha, that Buddha has two aspects, being awakened from ignorance, it's kind of like the Tsong, and expansive understanding of non-duality, meaning reality. Okay, we'll go into that more on Monday also. Okay, so those are the two verses. Now the commentary to that. Lama Tsongkhapa says, when the word Buddha, awakened and blossomed one. So in the Tibetan, Lama Tsongkhapa is just saying Sangye. When the word Sangye awakened and blossomed, so Sang, awakened, blossomed, gay, fully opened, refer to the one who is blossomed into suchness. Although the first part of the name, when we say, in Lama Tsongkhapa is saying Sangye, so Sang means awakened, Ge means blossomed, right? So the first part of the name awakened and blossomed, Tsong, that is left implicit. The convention Buddha is still used, the convention Sangye is still used as an epithet for such a person. Does that make sense? Remember, this is this is Lama Tsongkhapa's reasoning to say, without referring to the Sanskrit, say, or Yashomitra's commentary, where he explained that Buddha has these two aspects. The word Buddha, if you think of it as Vibhuda or Prabhuda, being awakened from ignorance or being blossomed or expansive or expanded in knowledge, it has those two meanings. Anna, you just wanted to remind me about taking a break, right? Yeah, we'll just go a little bit further here. So in Huntington's translation of that emptiness of emptiness, on note 660 at the end of his text, he says, the reading provided here works only with the Tibetan word for Buddha, Sangye, which is composed of two syllables meaning respectively awakened, Sang, so awakened from ignorance, let's say, and blossomed, Ge. More accurately, especially in a manner that fits the Sanskrit term Buddha, it should read something like the following. When the term awakened one, Buddha, is used as an epithet for someone, quote, whose mind has blossomed into suchness, unquote, the phrase into suchness, dekonanila, is left implicit. He's suggesting a way that you can understand Lama Tsongkhapa's explanation in terms of the Sanskrit. Yet the convention is simply to use the second part, Buddha, while leaving the first part, tattva, implicit. So remember at the beginning of the text of maybe in Venerable Shanka's first classes that he's taking, we're at Nalanda, right? Again, going over these things. At the beginning of the text, we talked about Tattva Buddha. Do you remember that? Mikhail, do you remember that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And this is exactly what Lavallée Poussin, because I found the book on my drive, and it's exactly what he said. Even though the word Buddha does not have the tattva, it is implicit.
Right. So that's so at the beginning of our study of Madhyamakavatara of Gompa Rapsel, or maybe it was
no, it's at the beginning when he's explaining why we can use the word Buddha for Rong Sangye and so on.
For Pratikya Buddha, because the Buddha of Pratikya Buddha means one who's awakened into thusness. So that has come up before, Tattva Buddha. So he says, this is to say that the full expression should be Tattva Buddha, whose mind has blossomed into suchness. Yet the convention is to simply use the second part, Buddha, rather than Tattva Buddha, while leaving the first part, Tattva, implicit. He quotes Lodro Rinchen, makes this exact observation based on listing two distinct meanings to the word Buddha, meaning to awaken or to blossom or to realize. I don't know who Lodro Rinchen, who he was referring to, is referring to there. Okay, is making some sense? Yeah, Venerable.
Could you repeat again where in Huntington you were reading this?
Yeah. So this is note 660, and the page number would be the same as the page previously.
So 247 or something?
247, 248.
Okay.
Previously, I was talking about note 116, and this is note what? What was this?
Oh, 660? How did you get to 660?
No, that's in Tumten Jinpa 660. The note.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Right. Sorry about that. So I
Okay,
was,
no problem.
yes. Okay, so that was Tupten Chemba. Okay, so let's take a little break. A little bit to sorry, so could have been. So yeah, so when the word Buddha, Lama Tsongkhapa's commentary to verse 687, right? That Jeremy was asking about. So when the word Buddha in Tibetan, Sangye, so Lama Tsongkhapa is taking just the Tibetan, when that refers to the one who is blossomed into suchness, when that refers to the one who is Beni Deba, who is blossomed or expanded into suchness, although the first part of the name awakened is not mentioned, it's left implicit, we still use the expression Buddha. The convention Buddha is still used as an epithet for such a person. So in other words, Sangye, yeah. So a little bit labored in order to see the analogy here. But so the next paragraph says, so just so, in other words, in the same way, we should recognize that it is only because the mind is primary between matter and mind in the world. What's most important when we talk about the evolution of the world or what things are arising? So the Vaisheshikas would say that matter, everything comes from matter, external matter and so forth. So we should recognize that it is only because the mind is primary between matter and mind in the world. So the mind is principle, the most important thing. The material outside is substantial cooperative causes and so forth. It is only because the mind is primary between matter and mind in the world that the sutras speak of the world of the three realms as being mind only. It's referring to the fact that mind is principle between mind and matter, leaving implicit the second part of the phrase, which, quote, which is primary, or which is, quote, primary or principle. Instead of saying, what was it, Tattva Buddha, you can just use Buddha and know that Tattva is implied. And if you say mind only, you would know that mind is mind only, mind alone, or you could say, is primary. Mind only is primary between mind and matter. Yeah, now I already forgot who had their hand up. Was that Paul? Did you have? Yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say that was basically what I was going to ask, what you just explained, if that's how to read it. But I was also going to say you also see it, I think, in Tantra, where you see the phrase mind only. And Tsongkhapa explains it and says what this means is wind and mind only. That the nature. So it's again the same sort of explanation.
Right. So when we talk about the world arising from karma arises from the mind. So we can say that mind is the principal creator of the world. In other words, reading on from Jinpa's translation, in other words, this statement of, quote, mind only precludes form, material and so forth, as being primary in constituting the three realms. So Western science would say that generally, and unless you get into people who are right on the forefront of the discourse about what mind is, most of the world physics world would say that the world is constituted of material, right? That our minds, although we can do things with our minds, we can create instruments and manipulate the world, that the world has been created out of matter and so forth. Whereas In other words, the statement of mind only precludes form and so on as being primary in constituting the three realms. The meaning of such sutras is not to state that the mind alone exists intrinsically, inherently, and to reject external reality. So that's exactly the proposition of the Chittamatrans, right? They're saying that mind exists inherently, and they reject external reality that's a different nature than the mind. The meaning of such sutras is not to state, when we state that mind only, is not to state that mind alone exists intrinsically and to reject external reality and assert that matter has no existence. That's not the meaning of only in that case. Only, you could say that alone, you could translate sam or matra as alone. Mind alone is primary. Mind only is primary. The principal creator. Remember, it's not the outer kinds of creators that we talked about last week. So continuing, so the meaning of the 10 Ground Sutra, this quotation that was alluded to, and we read some of about mind only, it must be accepted without reservation. So there, it actually was, there was a quotation in the Ten Bhumi Sutra explaining when it itself mentions mind only, it's meaning that mind is the principal creator. So in the 10 Ground Sutra, so the meaning of the 10 Ground Sutra must be accepted without reservation, exactly according to how we have explained it. For if, in accord with your position, lower school's position, if it were the case that the Buddha knew that the world of the three realms to be intrinsically existent mind only, right? So the existence of these three worlds is said to be mind only, right? They don't exist as external things. If the Buddha knew that the world of the three realms to be intrinsically existent mind only, so you have that extra word there at the beginning, inherently or intrinsically existent mind only. So that's making it more, that's adding those two factors together, the Chittamatra position that the mind itself is inherently existent and that it is, the outer world is mind only. On that basis, so if it were the case that the Buddha knew that the world of the three realms to be intrinsically existent mind only, and on that basis did engage in the rejection of matter in the 10 Ground Sutra, if that were the case, in that case, why then would the Great One, the Mahatma, proclaim in the same 10 Ground Sutra that the mind or consciousness was born from karma and delusion? So what is that talking? What consciousness is that that's born from karma and delusion? Richard, do you have any idea? What's he talking about there?
Well, this sentence has one couple more words. It said karma and
Yeah,
delusion or ignorance.
Deluded consciousness is born from karma and delusion.
Yeah, so was it when we're talking about the 12 links, we say that because of ignorance, there is karma and karmic formations. And as a result of karmic formations, there is, quote, the third link, consciousness, which means the consciousness that's been imbued with that karma that has been created. So it's in statements like that, because the 10 Ground Sutra mentions a lot about the 12 links. So why would the Great One proclaim in the Dashabhumika that the mind or consciousness was born from karma and delusion? So it's talking about the third link. Or ignorance is born from ignorance. So the first link is ignorance, karma, and delusion. I say karma. First link is ignorance, is delusion. Second link is karma. Third link is the mind. So the mind is born from them. 4, because the Buddha stated, conditioned by ignorance, volition arises, right? Or karmic formations arise. It's just the duce. Conditioned by ignorance, the second link, karmic formations arise. And conditioned by karmic formations, volition, consciousness arises. That's the third link. Such statements will be untenable. If you were to say that the mind is inherently existent, the mind, how did it just say there? Inherently existent mind only. So why would the Buddha have said that the mind arises from that? Because if it was inherently existent, it wouldn't arise like that from the conditions of karmic formation and so forth.
But aren't ignorance and karmic formations dependent upon a mind to start with?
Yeah. Yeah. Then?
Well, then what shouldn't it exist before the third consciousness or whatever arises?
So the 12th length, the 12th length, the 12th link is rebirth, right? So rebirth implies a new gross consciousness and so forth. So it's implicit there. All of these things are existing simultaneously. When you talk about the mind, the mind that is the primary mind that's concomitant, that is simultaneous with ignorance. So ignorance is a mental factor, right? So it has a primary mind. That mind, both of them are consciousness. Both of them are shepa, right? Both of them are instances, examples of consciousness. So that's continuing on through here. But the third link is talking about that particular consciousness that's been imbued with the karmic seed created in the second link. So the word consciousness in the third link is referring to when at a certain point, when consciousness has been imbued with that karmic imprint, so to speak. Okay. For he stated, conditioned by ignorance, volition arises. Volition is the way that the second link was often translated in the earlier translations. Paul or John, do you have a take on that? What is it about in Duce?
Yeah, duce.
Duce Gile. So volitional karma. Yeah. So Duce, how do we translate the second link, Duce Gile? Karmic formations. Karma which has been formed. Duce Gile. Lay karma which has been duced, which has been formed.
Compositional factors was what Jeffrey used. Is it compositional factors?
Compositional factors is just for duce alone. Yeah. But, so when we say duce gile, I think, what do they call samskaras?
Samskara, right?
Okay. So let's continue. So in Thupten Jinpa's translation of Lama Tsongkhapa, it says, so the Buddha stated in the 10 Ground Sutra that consciousness is an effect of ignorance. Right? So Sean, remember that consciousness here is talking about the third link, is a result of ignorance. Ignorance gives rise to karmic formations which leave their imprint on an afflicted mind, or a mind which has been imprinted with that imprint. So the Buddha stated in the 10 Ground Sutra that consciousness is an effect of ignorance and volition or karmic formations, meaning the second link. He did not say it has intrinsic existence. Buddha does not say that consciousness has intrinsic existence. If it had intrinsic existence, it could not be an effect, right? It could not result from something. Even if, in general, the Buddha had taught, in brackets, elsewhere, that consciousness is both dependently originated and intrinsically existent, right? For the lower schools, there's no problem. They say, yeah, the Buddha, yeah, everything inherently exists, but it's still dependent. The impermanent phenomena are still dependent arisings. They don't see any contradiction. But Prasangika would say that if phenomena were intrinsically existent, if they were substantially existent, intrinsically existent, truly existent, they couldn't be cause and effects. So even if, in general, the Buddha had taught elsewhere that consciousness is both dependently originated and intrinsically existent, yeah, he said that some places, given that it is inconceivable for a faultless speaker to adopt both of these positions as his own. So what does that mean? A perfect teacher, such as the Buddha, who realizes that phenomena are empty of inherent existence. It would be inconceivable for such a pramana teacher, faultless teacher, when I say authentic teacher who has realized reality, for him to say that he did not say that it was intrinsically existent, that consciousness was intrinsically existent. It would be incomprehensible. Given that is, I have to go back to the long sentence here. Even if, in general, the Buddha had taught elsewhere that consciousness is both dependently originated and intrinsically existent, given that it is inconceivable for a faultless speaker to adopt both of these positions, that things are dependently arisen and intrinsically existent, from the Buddhist faultless teacher it would be incomprehensible for them to say that in general as their position, to adopt both of those positions as their own. We would have to recognize that he did adopt such statements for others' sake, for the sake of others. Like at the beginning when we're offering the mandala and dedicating it, please send down a rain of Dharma in accordance with the needs of those to be subdued. So in accordance with the needs of others, for others' sake, to help lead other spiritual trainees, he will say that at a certain point. So that's just a provisional or ininterpretable teaching when he said those things, that he might have said that phenomena were dependent originations, but that they were intrinsically existent. That was to lead disciples, okay? Making sense? What do you think, Don?
Well, it raises a question in my mind how that helps disciples.
Well, yeah, like in order for those beings who are not yet able to grok emptiness, right? That phenomena that we see, let's say, or touch or smell or taste, that's not real. The Buddha taught various things, to get them up to see the actual meaning that phenomena are empty of their apparent findability, that there is no, that let's say a tree is merely imputed upon its parts, or a bodhisattva is just a name. In order to get to that point, the Buddha had to lead them sequentially in various stages. Sometimes staying for quite a while at that place, like the example of the jewel, what do they call it? The jewel merchants who went on this long journey to jeweled land. There are various stories about the same situation, but this particular one when they couldn't get to the actual jewel land that the jewelers wanted to get to. They were going to harvest all these jewels and put in the ship and then take them back, become rich and so forth. Before they got there, when they were getting disheartened, it had been such a long time. The captain, knowing that it was still a long time and there were a lot of difficulties that had to be accomplished, stopped at an island before the final island, which is way, way off in the distance there, the jeweled land, and told them they'd reached that destination. It's kind of like analogy of nirvana. This is the final destination, because they couldn't contemplate working for that longer one. So let me continue reading here. Here is the reason why both positions cannot be the Buddha's own standpoint. That the phenomena are dependent originations, dependent arisals, and that they're inherently existent. That can't be his own standpoint. Were it to be the case that consciousness existed by virtue of its own essence, if it was inherently existent, it is certain, therefore, that in no possible manner does consciousness possess intrinsic existence. Oh, wait, I must have skipped something. Were consciousness to exist by virtue of its own essence, it would not be dependent upon ignorance and volition. Sorry, I left that out. If consciousness were inherently existent, exist by virtue of its own essence, which the lower schools accept, it would not be dependent on ignorance and volition. It wouldn't be modified by ignorance and volition, which the 12 links that the Buddha taught explicitly say. The fact is, consciousness is dependent upon such factors, and as such, it has no existence by virtue of its own essence. It is certain, therefore, that in no possible manner does consciousness possess intrinsic existence. Yeah, Sumansh, what are you thinking?
Venerable George, Sean was before me.
Yeah, but Sean has asked several questions, and he has a deep well of questions. So I thought I would give you, the chance. Yeah.
Okay. So
for showing sort of like sangha-like behavior to the person who was previous. Yeah.
So my question is, when it comes to the third link over here, consciousness, this is the defiled consciousness, right? This is, I don't know what the Tibetan term is that is used here, but I assume it doesn't include the clear light nature of the mind.
Yeah, here we're talking about the contaminated consciousness, right?
So may I ask, what is the Tibetan?
Clear light of nature of the mind, clear light, the clear light mind, the mind of clear light, is that contaminated or not?
It is not.
Even if it's in the mind stream of someone whose mind is contaminated? My mind is still
I think I would have to quote you some other Dzogchen texts.
But we don't have to worry about Dzogchen. Just from the Gelugpa general point of view, Prasangika point of view.
The clear light nature of the mind, even in a person who is samsaric, is not contaminated, as per my understanding.
That's correct. That's correct. That's the general position that that clear light mind, the subtlemost clear light mind. I'm not talking about the conventional clear light nature of the mind. The subtlemost clear light nature of the mind. That's called a very subtle mind that we talk about in terms of Tantra. So when we talk about that is not contaminated. So in my continuum right now, there is that subtle clear light nature of the mind that is not obvious. It's not manifested because of the Tantra has its own reasons about the airs being in the other 72,000 nadis and so forth, but because the conceptual minds are present, like the sun in the sky, that prevents us from seeing the stars right now, right? Because the conventional minds are present, we can't see the clear light nature of mind. So I have clear light nature of the mind as one of my continuing qualities of consciousness on that subtlemost level. And that is undefiled, right? That is uncontaminated. Okay. Yeah.
Okay, but you're saying that this third link is the contaminated consciousness.
Yeah, I'm not talking about the clear light nature of the mind, right?
Yes.
Thank
That,
you, thank you.
Yeah, yeah. So
that's Nambar
come again?
So just for Suvansh's sake, that's Nambar Shepa, right?
Nambar Shiva,
Like,
yeah, Vijnana, I think, right?
yeah, Vigyan. Yeah.
Vijnana. Okay, so Sean.
Well, Suvash hit one of my questions, so that takes care of that one. But the other question is, does the Buddha provide a mechanism by which a non-material consciousness can affect a material substance?
Does he provide a mechanism for this? Is that what you said? Does he propound a mechanism? Yeah. So mind creates karma. Karma, when it ripens, manifests as sometimes as material, the material world. So, like we say in the Abhidharma Kosha, the world and the inhabitants therein are the result of karma. So, where does karma come from? It comes from mind. So you can say that that indirectly the mind has created the external world because it's created the karma which is ripened in the appearance of the external world. Where's your face? Oh, yeah, okay.
But how did it get from a mental karma to a substantial physical substance?
Yeah.
When those substances aren't the same, so according to what you've told us.
I've tried to say.
Well, because I saw a teaching the other day where the Dalai Lama was saying that he thought there must be some kind of substance that we just haven't identified that makes up consciousness. But
yeah, I think what he's talking about is the scientific, experiments that would be able to measure some kind of existence of consciousness. Right now it's only science is only able to measure it in terms of electroencephalographs and electrical activity in the brain, right? In general, or the spinal column. But the consciousness exists from the Buddhist point of view. That does not constitute consciousness. Those electrical activities may be analogs of some mental consciousness that's taking place, but they are not, that's not an example of consciousness. Consciousness is something that's formless. So consciousness creates karma. So that's the point that you're finding some difficulty. How that karma then that's created by mind can manifest as material. So when we talk about leaving a karmic impression in our mind, there are certain karmic impressions that are collective, that we have the vision of the world and so forth, that we share with other sentient beings, collective karma. So when that collective karma, after an eon of dissolution in the world system, evolution of world systems, there comes a period of creation. So the world, a new world is created. Many world systems, where beings can live. maybe some of them are worlds like ours where there are humans and so forth. So the appearance out of emptiness of those world systems is a dependent origination. It has arisen dependent on causes and conditions. Some of the causes are the karmic causes of sentient beings, collective karma to see a universe, and the specific conditions are the material that had disintegrated in the previous universe. So when we talk about it, an eon of creation, an eon of duration, an eon of dissolution, and then an empty eon. Sometimes we talk about that. So all of these appearances that we have arise because of our karma that was created by the mind. So if you would like to, so in a certain sense, you would like to feel more comfortable as a Chittamatrin that, yeah, all of this, I can understand how all of this is just mind only, that the mind can't create the outer reality. But from the Prasangika point of view, outer reality does exist, and it is a manifestation. It is a result of karma. It is one of the environment. What do we say? The
It sounds like it's being birthed out of the mind, which makes it still some aspect of mind, doesn't it?
Well, the karma acts as
I mean, we're labeling it something different to distinguish it.
Yeah, so
but it seems like it's being born out of the same thing.
Originally, so mind itself creates actions. Those actions leave an imprint in the mind, and although we don't see the mechanism of it ourselves, the Buddha said that those karmic imprints are associated with our mind, either as imprints or as what's the word? Disintegratedness that continues along. That when the right conditions arise, that karma will manifest in four ways, right? Those karmic seeds. They'll manifest as a maturation in one of the six realms. They'll manifest as actions similar to their causes as effects. So if we had killed before, we would have the tendency of being injured or killed. Effects similar to the cause as an action. So if we'd killed before, we have the tendency to kill again, habitual effect. And then the environmental effect, environmental result. So the environmental result is of the collective karma of sentient beings is this world. So we all see this world, and for the Prasangika, that which is seen does have an external reality, but not in the way that you would like to think as being substantially existent and really existent and findable and so forth. Okay, leave that for more grinding of the mill, maturate, as you, like the cows masticate their grass or whatever, their cud, let that sit for a little while and marinate. Okay. So where did we go? The fact is, consciousness is dependent upon such factors, and as such, it has no existence by virtue of its own essence. It is certain, therefore, that that in no possible manner does consciousness possess intrinsic existence. There's no way that it has it. In no matter, this interesting way of thinking is that you can't think of it intrinsic existence that way or this way. So, continuing, so just like the floating hairs being perceived by someone with an eye disorder, was it ophthalmology? Was it? Oh,
Myodysopsia.
Myodislopsia?
Dysopsia.
Dysopsia. Myodysopsia. So someone with such an eye, or, like floaters, in other words, just like floating hair is being perceived by someone with an eye disorder, we should understand that an intrinsically real consciousness is something that exists when the conditions. We should understand that an intrinsically real consciousness is something that exists when the conditions are present for such distortion. What that means is the appearance of an intrinsically existent consciousness exists when the conditions are present for such distortion, in other words, ignorance, and does not exist when such conditions for distortion are absent. This then is the understanding. Does that make sense? Anna, did you get that?
Thank you, Venerable George. I think I did.
Good. Okay. That's excellent. KT, how's it going?
Oh, it's going okay. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. We should all send some dryness to KT. It's been floods in Milwaukee, and she's still bailing out her basement, I guess, a little bit from the floods. Okay. So the text continues. Ooh, okay. This just be the end. That the sequential presentation of dependent origination, when we talk sequential, is one of the ways it's a forward progression of the 12 links, right? Ignorance, karmic formations, consciousness, name and form, and so forth. That the sequential presentation of dependent origination shows how, when there is ignorance, the condition for distortion, that's a condition that gives a distorted mind, a mind that is not seeing reality correctly. So when there is that, when it's present, the condition, which is a condition for distortion, consciousness comes to exist, and how when there is no ignorance, consciousness will come to cease. That means the third link, consciousness that has a karmic, a contaminated karmic seed implanted upon it. There's a lot that has to be read in the words there. When there's no ignorance, consciousness will come to cease is stated through presenting the reverse order of dependent origination rather than the sequential. Both of them are sequences, the forward sequence and the reverse sequence, through presenting the reverse order of dependent origination. Having thus presented, the sutra makes the extensive statements such as the following. Thus, karmic formations, volition, possess faults of multiple ill consequences. Right? Karmic formations have these 4 kinds of results and so forth. Multiple ill consequences, bad results. And when it is discerned with discriminative awareness as devoid of essence, as unborn and unceasing. So that's where we're going to stop right there. So we're going to continue next time. And we can also mention on discussion group on Monday, we'll go over this PDF that Doris very kindly presented earlier. Also, I'll have another PDF with some of these other statements. Before we finish, how are we feeling? How are you doing? Doing okay? Paul's doing good. Suvash, you look you're okay? Okay, good. Mikhail, any questions? No? Doris has something she wants to say. Oh, she's just saying thumbs up. Okay. Okay. Rachel, any questions? Nothing? Louise? Notice I'm skipping Sean. We'll deal we'll deal over private chat and on Monday because you're an endless well of questions. Jeremy, you have anything? Okay. John? Nothing?
Thank you.
KT? Last call for alcohol. No? Okay. Don? Okay. Okay. So let's dedicate our merits. Things are going more crazy, roller coaster in the world. Although supposedly there was going to be an open Strait of Hormuz, now the ships are being attacked and who knows what's going to happen. So in this very dark time when people's minds are going crazy, try to dedicate our merits so that we can eventually make some stab at bringing these very people that are being afflicted and are imposing afflictions on others, bring them to the state of Buddhahood. Due to these virtues, may I quickly become a Guru Buddha and lead all migrators without exception into that very same state. May the supreme precious bodhicitta that has not arisen arise and grow as a result of these virtues. And may that which has not arisen and that which has arisen not diminish, but instead become greater and greater, more and more, as a result of these virtues. For the quick return of Lama Zopa Rinpoche's emanation, peerless teacher and assembly of children of the victorious ones, Shravakas, Pratika Buddhas, victorious Losang, father and sons, together with your lineages, all objects of refuge of the infinite realms, please bestow here and now the virtue and goodness to accomplish this prayer. In upholding and spreading the Muni's precious and complete teachings through explanation and practice, you, Lama Zopa, wore the armor of patience that is never discouraged. Incomparable Venerable Guru, I make requests. Sole gateway through which all benefit and happiness emerge, referring to Lama Zopa himself, while striving exclusively for the welfare of both the victorious one's teachings and mother living beings. You, Lama Zopa, suddenly passed away, departed. Here's this Depa, passed into peace, at which point I lost hope. Nevertheless, through the undeceiving truths of the oceanic blessings of the Triple Gem and the oceanic truths, the oceanic blessings of the Three Jewels and the truth of the great waves of bodhicitta, of the bodhisattvas, the children of the victorious ones. As a result of these, may the smile of a new reincarnation swiftly beam in glory for fortunate disciples. Finally, you who are my eyes for viewing all the infinite scriptures, supreme gateways for the fortunate ones traveling to liberation, engaging skillfully, moved by mercy, illuminating spiritual friends, I request, please live long and stable lives. So thank you for your patience. Minto, glad to see you were able to receive some of the ambrosia of the Buddha this afternoon. Look forward to seeing you on, some of you on Monday, and if not, next Saturday. Take care.
Thank you, Venerable George.
Thank you, Venerable